Hey, this is Will, and in this lesson, we are going to be generating our client certificates for the Kubernetes cluster using the certificate authority that we created in the last lesson. There are several client certificates that we need to generate, and I'll just be pasting in a lot of the commands here rather than making you watch me type them out. But you want to scroll down a little bit and check out the description to this video, because in the description you can find all the commands that we're going to be using in this demonstration. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm in my directory where I'm generating all my certificate files. And mine is just in my home directory, KTHW for Kubernetes the hard way. So I'm just going to change directory into there. And as you can see, I still have my certificate authority files from the previous lesson. So I'm going to go ahead and generate the admin client certificate. And here's the command that I'm going to use to do that. Again, I have my curly braces. So all this is just going to be run all as a single command. And I'm doing two things. I'm creating an admin csr.json that is a certificate signing request for this particular certificate, and it's got my username there of admin. And I'm using CFSSL gensert to generate the certificate. And you'll notice that I am passing in my ca.pem and my ca-key.pem. Those two certificate authority files are going to be used to sign this certificate that I'm generating. So I'm just going to go ahead and run that command. If I do an ls, you can see that I now have my admin key.pem and my admin.pem. So just like the certificate authority, I now have these two PEM files for my admin certificate. Next, I'm going to generate my Kubernetes client certificates for Kubelet. And these certificates are just a little more complicated than the one we did for admin, because these certificates are going to be signed for specific hosts. So first, I'm going to set up a few variables. I'll go ahead and clear the screen so that it's a little bit easier for you to see what's going on. I'm going to set up some variables. And the first one I'm going to set up is just going to be worker0_host. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that to the host name of my first worker cloud server. So I'm going to come over here to linuxacademy.com in my browser, and I'm going to click on cloud servers here. And this is just a good place for me to find information about my cloud servers. And if you remember from earlier in the course, I said that I was going to use server 3 and server 4 as my workers. So those are the two that I need to focus on right now. So my first worker is going to be server 3. So I'm just going to copy the host name, which is wboyd3.mylabserver.com. And of course, your host name will be different than mine. So you'll need to copy your host name from public host names here. You'll want that third server, which is going to be our first worker node. The first two are the controllers, and 3 and 4 are the worker nodes. So I'm just going to copy that host name. And I'm going to come back here and I'll set worker0.host to that host name. Next, I'm going to set an IP address. So I'll do a variable called worker0_IP equals, and I'm going to come right back here and I'm going to copy the private IP address for my first worker. Now make sure that you use the private IP, because the public IP changes a lot. Every time your server stops and starts up again, the public IP is going to change. And if that happens and you use the public IP to sign your certificate, you're going to have to regenerate your certificate every time the IP changes. And we don't want to have to do that. So we're going to use the private IP. So I'll just use that private IP. I'll copy it, come back over here and paste it in. Now I'm going to do the same thing for my second worker, and I'll just call it worker1_host. And I'll come over here and get the public host name for my second worker, which is wboid4.mylabserver.com. And I'll paste that in there. And of course, I also need a worker1_IP. So I'll come back over here and I'll get that private IP of my second worker. Now that I have those 4 variables set up, I'm going to run one of those big curly brace block commands to go ahead and generate my certificates. So here's my command, and of course, again, you can find this command in the description to the video. But if you look, you can see that I'm referencing the variables that I just created. So I'm actually naming this file using this worker0 host name. So this file is going to be wboid3.mylabserver.com-csr.json, and then I'm referencing those values throughout this file. And again, in my CFSSL GenCert, I'm specifying a host name using both that host name and that IP. So this particular certificate is going to be signed using this host name and IP from up here. And if I scroll down a little more, I'm doing the same thing for my second worker node. So here I'm generating the certificate for the first worker node, and then down here at the bottom, I'm doing the same thing for the second worker node, referencing that worker1 host, and down here, the worker1 IP as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just run that command. And if I do an ls, you can see I've got all my files here now. I have my wboid3 mylabserver.com key, and the same thing, wboid3 mylabserver.com pem, and I have the same thing for wboid4. So I have my private and public keys generated for both of these servers, and these are the certificates that I'm going to use for the kubelet service that will be running on each of those respective servers. Now that I have generated my kubelet client certificates, I'm ready to generate the certificate for the controller manager. And I'll clear the screen again so that you can see what's going on a little more easily. And now we're going back to somewhat simple commands again. We don't need to set up any variables here. This one is very similar to the admin certificate that we generated earlier. And I'm just generating a certificate for Kube Controller Manager. So I'm going to run that. And of course, I've got my Kube Controller Manager key.pem and my Kube Controller Manager.pem. Next, I'm going to do the same thing for Kube Proxy. This one is also very simple and straightforward. Going to run that command. And now I've got my Kube Proxy.pem and my Kube Proxy Key.pem. And last but not least, I'm going to run the same command for Kube Scheduler. So now I'm generating my certificate for Kube Scheduler. I'm going to run that command, and I should have a Kube Scheduler key.pem and a Kube Scheduler.pem. So now there's a lot of different certificate files here, and these are all of the client certificates. There's a few more certificates that we're going to need to generate, but these are all the ones that are specifically client certificates that are going to be used to allow these different components of Kubernetes to authenticate with the Kubernetes API and with one another. In the next video, I'll show you how to generate the server certificate for the Kubernetes API.